This is our introductory lesson to our unit of Africa. I included these pictures on the front slide because they are super interesting to me and very telling of sub-Saharan African culture with the bright colored clothing and the jewelry and the hairstyles. And then you see also there's a modern element of the flip phone. So they were really interesting to me and I wanted to share them with you. So I want you to write something down on your sheet because Africa, and while we see some tribes and stuff like that in sub-Saharan Africa, we will also see this bit of technology. So that's kind of a cool merge between modern technology and traditional culture. Okay, physical Africa. Let's begin with your follow-along guide, and you'll need to write down some rivers, the largest freshwater lake being Lake Victoria, some desert regions. I want you to write down the Kalahari and the Sahara. I want you to also kind of be familiar with the Great Rift Valley, and it is very, very long, 3,700 miles long, and a giant fracture in the earth. So pay attention to that picture as well. The Sahel is the western part of Africa, and it is a growing desert region. And desertification is something we're going to talk a lot about with our Africa unit. But desertification is simply the desert is getting bigger and growing, and that could be for a variety of reasons. So you need to write those reasons down. It's not only due to drought and climate change, but it's also due to some things like farming the land too long, not letting the fields lie fallow between seasons long enough, and so the soil's not able to rejuvenate itself. It's also from overgrazing, herds of animals that eat the vegetation down to the root systems and kill that vegetation off, and so it doesn't regrow. So there's lots of different reasons there that you need to be familiar with desertification. You also need to be familiar with the Green Sahara, and that's the idea that the Sahara Desert wasn't always a desert region. It was called the Green Sahara because we have found cave paintings and so forth in the middle of the Sahara of teams of animals and population and so forth dating back to 2500 BC. Okay, moving right along. For political Africa, Africa is considered to be very politically unstable. There's a lot of dictatorships, abuses of human rights, disregard for the people. We'll watch a video about the Arab Spring, which began in 2010, in which merchants there kind of feel locked out of the system because they are unable to kind of obtain the required permits in order to just sell goods off the street. And that's only just to make money to live. That's not, we're talking about people who struggle. But political Africa can be a place that, would be government-wise dangerous or corrupt in certain countries, and the threat of revolution. A lot of this has been caused by European colonization, because when the Europeans came to Africa and colonized it, their effect was really detrimental. They brought their guns and their weapons and killed people and were at war with the natives, but also just disease indirectly, bringing those European diseases over, to which the indigenous people did not have immunities to. And so consequently, large groups and tribes died as a result, and then also spreading Christianity. But probably the biggest thing was just carving Africa up for different countries and saying, this is ours, this belongs to Spain or whatever. And they did that across tribal lines. And so they split groups of people and then also put groups of people together that had never gotten along, and now all of a sudden they're part of one country. And so it just created a lot of conflict for the Africans. So remember to fill in as you follow along a definition of refugees. If you don't know that, you need to look that up. Google that, and also what human rights are, you need to Google that as well. Now for number 10, you need to fill in the table in terms of all of these terms. Now for economics, again on the back side there's another table chart that you can fill in all these things, and that way you have all the information in one spot together. As far as culture goes, animism is big in Africa, and that is the idea that spirits are found in nature, and we'll see that in the video that we watch or the movie called The Power of One. Also, ancestor worship is important, and that is simply asking ancestors for guidance and help making choices. Many tribes and so forth in Africa are of matriarchal families. This is one term for some reason many people got wrong on their Unit 1 assessment. Matriarchal means communities and so forth are led by families and descent. All property and heritage is passed down through the mother's side. So the common misnomer here on the Unit 1 test was that it had something to do with material things, and that's not true. This happens to be with the mother's side of the family and all the power and heritage and property being passed down through that side. Okay, moving right along. So let's talk about conflicts really quick. The United States in particular gets involved with AIDS issue in Africa. AIDS is a huge problem. It's a global issue because it will affect all of us. And you can see some stats there at the bottom. But really the thing that we help with is the supplies and the doctors and the medicines and so forth, and the medical supplies, and also information. Really the biggest thing in Africa is just getting the right information out there. That there's a lot of miseducation in terms of how exactly AIDS is transmitted. As we, have that information readily available and teach children in schools and kids as they get into high school, you learn it's transmitted sexually. Because mythism is so big in Africa, there are different myths going around that have kind of perpetuated AIDS epidemic and making more people infected, and that's just miseducation. That maybe in order to keep from getting AIDS, sexual contact is something you should do, and we know in the United States that actually spreads the disease. So a lot of it is just getting the right information out there and making sure different people and tribes and stuff are educated on that. Third world countries typically have a lower standard of living, and they're lacking major resources, and also have political instability in those countries. And then lastly, we're going to be watching The Power of One, which is about apartheid. Apartheid is the separateness or separating races, and this was instituted by the Afrikaners, which were the Dutch in South Africa, the southernmost country on the continent of Africa. And so we'll watch this movie. It's about the Afrikaners and also the English. There's a lot of conflict in it. It's a story about, it's a love story, but it's also a boxing story. So usually my students really like it. So make sure you're familiar with that term apartheid and that it happened in South Africa. It's no longer the law of the land, but it used to be. It was government kind of sponsored segregation of the white Africans from the native Africans. And this concludes your lesson over Africa.